the infection fatality rate for this new coronavirus is likely to be in the same ballpark as seasonal influenza. Of course, there is still a little bit of uncertainty about the exact number, but it's clearly very different compared to the original thoughts or speculations or preliminary data that suggested a much, much higher infection fatality rate.
This is not a lethal virus. I just eyeballing it all, this may be a slightly serious virus. This may be a virus that's had some hotspots. Where there have been hotspots, you kind of wonder whether there are contributing factors, such as underfunded healthcare system, a geographical location, aging population, pollution, even down to the way that the deaths have been actually recorded. I mean, the poor old COVID-19 coronavirus, he's been accused of killing people when he was simply present at the point of death. Nevertheless, if I'm an old person, I don't want to meet my maker 3 or 6 months earlier than I need to, unless I'm particularly religious, I guess. So certainly, I think you have to accept that there has been some genuine seriousness about this situation, but lethality, justifying such extreme measures, I just don't buy it. Now, of course, this raises rather more questions than it answers, because if it isn't a lethal virus, in fact, I got a YouTube video earlier this morning from a study that's been done in America now that said that actually they've discovered a large part of the population of the case study have had it, or have had and have had mild symptoms or no symptoms at all. And his conclusion was that the COVID-19 virus might be no more serious than your ordinary flu. In fact, that was his conclusion. So it does really rather raise the question of what's behind this all. Now, I have my thoughts or my reflections, and I can't help but think that there's been a hell of a kind of a black swan coincidence of events. It's like an epic. It's nature, it's like some sort of mythology when you think about it. There's the number monster that's terrifying everybody and making them run for the hills and running around saying all is lost. Certainly they feel it, they don't express it. But you've also got a hero. You've got a doctor, one of the most sort of highly regarded professions. His job is to save lives, in a police state, being persecuted, and then actually dying of the very thing that he's trying to warn everybody about. I mean, that's a Hollywood movie right there, isn't it? And the whole thing takes place, you can almost see the opening pre-credits sequence of grisly sight of rotting market produce in this square in China, in this terribly unhygienic place, and a bat flapping around, and a Chinese man in a laboratory, with a test tube. I mean, it sounds, it's almost grotesque and macabre, this whole story. And then you've got the pronouncement of the WHO, or certainly at least, the pronouncement of the WHO on or around the 11th of March, declaring that this was a global pandemic. And you want to throw in the mix there for the conspiracy theorists amongst you, the little article that a friend sent me last week, which points out that Bill Gates is the second biggest donor after the United States of America to the WHO, and that the day before they announced it was a pandemic, him having been big on total lockdown, he had invested a very large amount of money into a business project to find a vaccine in double quick time. Then you've got the sorry story of Northern Italy, and then you've got lovely, it's so fitting, isn't it, the comical caricatures that you find in the Houses of Parliament. You've got the British political scene, and poor old lovable bumbling Boris Johnson, showing some fortitude, is about to go into battle, but it's kind of like suddenly he looks round and the army is deserted. The Imperial College have presented him with some, fired the rocket up into the air. The 500,000 people are about to die if you don't do anything, or if you go into battle. So I can't help but think that there's been coupled, of course, with the weapon. And you need a good magical weapon in any good Hollywood fantasy picture, and that's an extremely sharp, magical, double-edged sword, which is the internet. The rapidity with which bad news has been published and disseminated far outstrips any threat from a little old flu virus, quite frankly. It's the fear virus that can be rapidly spread across the globe. Now, to conclude, I don't think we're out of the woods yet. I think the politicians, and it's quite frightening really, have been using the cloak of the COVID-19 virus to go on a money printing bonanza. It's like in 2008 they injected us with the drug of quantitative easing. They kept on injecting us and they kept on injecting us, and now they're giving us a massive injection. And of course no one over the last 2 to 3 months is raising a single eyebrow. They're getting away with murder, and they're able to appease the people that they represent, and I'm afraid the people are to be held responsible here as well to blind themselves to what's going on and to accept this and to take the money that belongs to future generations and pocket it themselves. So yeah, but that's the subject of another documentary.
The UK government had been engaged in money printing, but to their credit they had at least been putting cash grants into the hands of a lot of small business. I now wanted to learn more about the impact on businesses in Sweden, and my client, Maria, now introduced me to a senior lawyer who worked for the local municipal authority and whose responsibility it was to assist struggling businesses through the crisis.
There are people who has to be protected from the virus, and so protect them. And if you look at the figures that says this percentage of the population are going to get it, and this amount of people are going to die from it. So that's not much worse than the normal flu. So I think that the economical consequences are too large to do it the way they do, even though that we are not the way the rest of Europe is. If I look at Denmark, for example, who shut everything down, and okay, they didn't have so many deaths, but now they are going to open up again, and they were going to get it again and again and again. Every time they close it and open up, they're going to get new cases. And now it's unfortunate that we got it into our elder homes.
Are you wearing face masks?
I think so, more or less, at least in a higher amount of people than we have in Sweden. Have you seen anyone in face mask here? No.
I have a face mask.
We do too.
Do you?
Yeah, we have those great ones. The
Texas Chainsaw Massacre ones.
yeah, kind of like I can show you a picture.
I'd like to see Maria one.
Yeah, I can show you a picture of the ones I bought, because in the beginning everyone was kind of
really early.
yeah, I bought them early before they ran out, because all the preppers bought them.
Oh my word! That's ridiculous. That's a monster.
Yeah, that's an FFP3 mask that will keep the virus out.
That will keep everything out.
Yeah, it will.
That's not going to do a great deal of good for your social life, but you were properly prepped up for a zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, because that's what we heard. Everyone's going to die when it comes. Because it was, like I said, it was in the beginning, and there was a kind of a big hype that now it's coming, and we are not prepared for it. When the Prime Minister here in Sweden had the speech to the Swedish people and saying that we had to take care, there was a program just after it where a woman said that we're only changing lives for lives, and that kind of landed in me, because now we are trading those lives of those elderly and sick people for the ones who are losing their business and are going to kill themselves because they see their life's works go to pieces, and that's going to cost us more than just letting it roll. We have a nightclub over here, just a couple of 100 meters away, who's just when they said that we had a limit of 500 people, so he was going to have a gig that evening and had invited 499 people, and the day before they said only 50, and he's going out of business. So he's I don't think. Of course, it depends on what the governments are going to give him instead, like in free rent or such things, then that he has to let his staff go and still has to pay them though. And he needs the bidrag. The support. The funding to Yeah, and he doesn't need things, or he needs real cash.
Yeah.
They have to give him, like, how much have you lost this month? Yeah, here you are. That can make him survive.
Let's look at some figures from the UK. There are 5.8 million small businesses in the UK, and they account for 3/5 of the employment and around half of the turnover in the private sector. They contribute around 50% of private sector GDP and annually about 450 billion to the UK economy. They are the antibodies in the economy that keep us all healthy and ticking over, providing us with the essentials of life: a bottle of milk, groceries, a newspaper, a packet of cigarettes, which then allows us to indulge our desires for a wider range of products and services provided by the big corporations.
Do you have any theories about what might be really going on? We're into
Conspiracy, yeah. No, I think that everyone is so afraid for doing the wrong thing and not doing the best. It's political. If I don't take care of my people, and a lot of them die, I'm not going to win the next election. The doctors and the professors, they say what they want to say and what they have found out.
What they really believe.
Yeah, this happened 100 years ago. This wouldn't be such a big thing. But all the social media and stuff makes people scared, and media has it's like when you read the newspaper. Well, now that's happened, and that's bad, and that's bad, and that's bad, because bad news sell papers. And it's like this now too, that everyone wants to be on the edge and come with the next horrible story in the tracks of Corona, COVID. But it's too much information, and everyone is reading it, and everyone says, on the other hand, you're supposed to read it, but you're supposed to neglect it, because it's just follow the government's orders. So these and these, people are dying everywhere. Yeah, but just keep calm. Keep your seatbelt on.
And Dr. Tegnell himself, when he was interviewed about it on the 15th of April by the German Marshall Fund, interview on YouTube, he was posed the question, is this more lethal, is it more dangerous than the ordinary flu? His response was to say, actually, that's an extremely interesting question and something that we're still debating. It's becoming clear to me, even from my first few experiences in Sweden, that here was actually a middle way that took a situation or a crisis seriously, implemented measures, but did not lurch towards extremes like a panicked herd heading for the economic cliff top. I was once again distracted from my musings on the state of small business by daily needs. It was time for a haircut. It seemed as if in every corner of economic life, small business was suffering. I had even been getting frantic messages from my cleaning lady in Warsaw, who kept on asking me if there was any extra work she could do, as she was rapidly losing clients. I also got a message from a book cover designer from Pakistan, whom I had commissioned to do a book cover on Fiverr. She was asking in rather desperate fashion for work. Corona disturbed the life. Please give. I need some help. Were these otherwise incidental anecdotes the herald of a much larger looming economic crisis? So, mission accomplished. Well, at least mini mission accomplished. Adil is from Syria. I had a chat with him. He's got a wife and an 8-month-old kid here in Vastervik, and he's got his family back in Syria. I asked him about the coronavirus, and he surprised me because he seemed like a young, healthy, buff kind of character. He says, "I'm afraid." So, you know, that's interesting. Perhaps coming from Syria, where there's obviously a lot of conflict, having a daughter, a very young daughter, you know, he's obviously taking things seriously, but it's the government had recommended that. My conversation with the barber, a young, healthy man, had strengthened me in my belief, that seemed astonishing at one level, that governments have this incredible power to set an agenda. I doubt he had done the hard yards in terms of informing himself about the details of the crisis, and it made me realise that many, if not most, put their trust in their governments where such fundamental matters are concerned. Whilst in times of crisis it is clearly important to make decisions and stick to them, what if the decision that the government has made is fundamentally wrong? I saw a likely willing victim for an interview. I am seated here with well, I haven't actually introduced myself and you haven't introduced yourself, but my name's Alex.
I'm Freda.
Freda.
Yeah.
Pleased to meet you, Freda. And I'm just going to ask Freda, I've ambushed Freda with this camera. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
I'm just going to put the sunglasses down. I'm just going to ask a couple of questions about how you feel about how the whole coronavirus situation is panning out in Sweden. My first question is, do you think it's lethal? Do you think it's dangerous and we need to take it seriously?
Yes.
Okay. Why do you think that?
Well, I think if you're not if you don't have any other health issues or something, you should go on as usual, I think, but be careful to not spread the virus. But if you're healthy and you don't feel sick or something, you should go on pretty much as usual, I think.
So if you're an older generation and you're ill, you should. I mean, I saw a couple of guys walking around on those Zimmer frames. They must have been 80.
Yeah.
Were they recklessly flaunting the the Swedish guidelines? They were definitely recklessly flaunting the Polish guidelines. They would have been ticketed. They're actually handing out tickets to couples who are too close to. We would be ticketed now.
Yeah.
By the police who walk around with yellow jackets. Oh yeah. But here
it's like the same. But it's up to you, I guess. Mm-hmm. If they want to be reckless and go out and roam the streets, they can do that. But
that seems to be the Swedish vibe. That you voluntary, you get the guidance, and it's up to you to decide whether or not you comply with it.
Yeah.
Can I ask you more that what process has led you to the conviction that it is dangerous? Is it an article you read? Did you lose a friend or relative?
No, I just it's such a massive amount of deaths
Yeah.
due to this virus all over the world. And I think that if it wasn't lethal or that serious,
Dangerous,
it would.
Yeah, the governments can't be wrong. This interview confirmed me in my belief that in really important matters, the majority trusted their governments and believed what they saw and read in the media. But was their trust being betrayed? Even 5 minutes casual research threw up some interesting data that seemed to set things in context, a context glaringly ignored by the media. If the statistics on the lethality of the virus were so self-evidently flawed, why were we so willing to so readily, almost eagerly, sacrifice small business, these antibodies of our economic well-being? I now found another individual who was not so trusting of government or so quick to buy into the horror stories promulgated by the media.
If people or countries were genuinely looking for saving lives, why now? All of a sudden, there's so much going on in the Western world. There's people dying of food-related diseases in massive amounts. These are well-known, decade-long statistics showing how many people would die in Europe only out of eating bad food.
Why now?
Why of a sudden is this such a bad thing when people normally die a lot from things you could have prevented? I mean, governments can. Virus is a very difficult thing to control.
And it's a difficult thing to deal with anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, it's extremely difficult to control. On the other hand, to control how people eat and what they eat and at what cost, it's easy to control.
Cigarettes. We were talking about cigarettes
Yeah.
earlier. Tell me the story about the change in price between Swedish and British cigarettes over the last 10 years.
10,
It's another
probably
mystery.
more. Yeah, like we were talking about cigarettes being very cheap in Sweden. They are compared to the UK. Suddenly, UK is more than the twice.
But there used to be a time when it was the reverse.
Yeah, I remember in the 90s. I think that cigarettes were always cheaper in the UK.
Now, I don't know how many lives cigarettes and lung cancer takes away.
Lot.
But can the government do without the tax from cigarettes?
Right. That's the interesting part.
Yeah.
That's when you start talking about why you have a government for any particular country doing this kind of a massive printing of resources for a virus when usually they don't. I can't help to try to think about what's the thing about this particular virus. What would have happened if we just would have let it be and see how many people would get infected?
Yeah.
And how many would die, and then you put that in context with how many people die out of bad habits in any form, which could have been prevented, which is easier to prevent because it's a habit, it's not a virus.
It's a very good question. Very good question.
Because the resources poured out now is, like for Sweden, we're pouring out so much money, and for decades we've been debating about losing funds in our overall healthcare systems.
Yeah.
The hospitals are not getting enough funding, resulting in doctors not wanting to take the jobs because it's less paid. They would rather be private, resulting in the hospitals doing rental doctors. And we got a lot of Polish rental doctors here, like 2-3 times the cost. So there's so much things going on and so many cutbacks to save money,
costs.
and suddenly there's unlimited amount of money for the healthcare. And somehow I think the organizations working with pandemics, they know this. They always try to tell the governments that you need to have contingency plans, you need to have backup resources, but nobody listens.
Maybe this explains the mystery. they want the Western world to start properly resourcing their healthcare systems, so they declare a pandemic that's 10 times more lethal than the flu, and all countries like dominoes have to start injecting money into their healthcare.
That would be really clever. Not sure it's
a conspiracy theory idea.
Yeah, but I don't think they will get away with it. It has to come from the right source. To get a country like the US spending, I don't know, they're talking about up to $3 trillion. The amount of money is, you can't even imagine how much money that is.
Yeah. And they've killed the economy for 2 months, so how on earth are they going to generate the tax revenues to pay for this?
That's the next thing. It is. This is going to be talked about and debated and analyzed, and the most interesting parts I'm looking forward to is how the researchers or the scientists will analyze the psychological effect, how the government as a unit has been thinking about it, why they did what they did or not, how it affected the population, how individuals in different countries were responding to the virus. I have customers, some are really scared. You can see that, and I would think, why are you so scared? Nothing to be that scared of. You should be, if you're this scared now, there's probably been a lot of things you should have been scared about earlier.
Yeah.
So why now?
They've caught the fear virus, haven't they?
It's a built-in fear. Some people have it, and once you trigger it, they get a death fear, a real one. Internet has a lot of take on this, because in the end it's about how and what people think. Governments have to respond to that. Elected people have to respond to that. And people privately in their homes respond with the back of their head. If you're fed something and it triggers your fear, that's it.
You don't even know you got it.
You don't know you got it. And that's the thing, suddenly we can see, which is unusual. I've never seen that before, but I've seen people who are genuinely scared. And that in Sweden, you don't see that. Because we haven't had a war in, I don't know last time we ever were in a war, but nothing's been going on here, so people are generally not scared. And when you suddenly see ordinary people, and some of them are really scared, like for dying, you would see how they walk, how they would try to keep a distance. Obviously you're supposed to keep a distance, but most people would be like casual about it. Okay, I won't be sneezing on you, okay, just keep it off. But some people would be scared, you can see in their eyes. That's a new thing, never seen it. Very interesting in a way. Probably not fun for them, but for me it's interesting. There you have it, the fear virus. Yesterday I had a customer, she wanted an envelope. So I opened a brand new pack of envelopes. And these are regular type envelopes, you lick on them and you close them. And she didn't want to lick on it because it could be a virus on it. But I just opened the package, which is a sealed plastic package. So I didn't want to go into a debate with her, but I reflected on her way of thinking. And that's a young person.
Oh, she wasn't old?
Somewhere around 25. Young person, I would say probably very healthy, but she just got the fear virus, as she said. And it scared her. Genuinely, she was afraid. Yeah. And I'm thinking, well, once you awaken that monster, the fear monster, this is gonna stick. So even if this passes, something has been woken up. So the internet is probably going to make it a bit worse. People will be more scared, and when people are scared, it doesn't have to do anything with the virus, but what scared people do very weird decisions, and they act very weird.
One of the things that had been nagging at me was that Vastervik was just a small town, an outlier in terms of the crisis, and had not really been seriously impacted. And the barista at the coffee house had told me that in Stockholm it was very serious, with everyone wearing masks and locking themselves up at home. I loitered, juggling my options about like a drunk circus performer, a state of mind that was to become a rather distinctive feature of my trip. Jump on the train to Karlskrona ferry port? That was the reasonable thing to do. So I got on a train to Stockholm.